Okay, so in this video, I'll basically be going over how to build SOPs and when to systemize your business. Now, I've built more than 200 systems, worked in more than 22 businesses, and been on more than 120 interviews. So like when it comes to building systems and SOPs, you could say I fairly have an idea of what I'm speaking about. But when it comes to building SOPs, there are basically three ways I go about doing it, depending on how the business is. So it depends if you are building SOPs for your own business, SOPs for when you are delivering for clients, and SOPs for when you are delivering for ongoing clients. Now, I'll start with your own business. A lot of guys basically build SOPs before the first employee. What I basically do is build SOPs after the first employee. Now, the reason for this is simple. So, when you have your first employee, you basically have to teach them and they have to understand. So, only after you teach them what you do and they understand, can you then build the SOP? Because if you build an SOP before teaching them, then what will happen is they might not understand. They might not understand because the context is not the same. As a business owner, you always have more context than any type of employee will ever have on your own business, which means only after you teach them how to basically do the process can you basically be 100% certain that they know how to basically do the stuff that you want them to do. So when it comes to your own business, only build the SOPs. For systems, you can do it before then, but like for the SOPs, only do it after you've gotten your first employee and you've basically taught them how to do it. And the good thing is you can basically ask them to create the SOPs, which means after they've understood it, you can basically ask them to create the SOPs, or you can create it with them, or you can create it on your own. And the good thing is, after that too, what I normally like to do is I basically like to get the average time to complete. Now, it depends on which type of SOP, but normally, like what I do is I speed run through the task, I let them speed run through the task, I basically combine the time, get the average, and that will be the average time to complete. Because then once I have this average time to complete, I can basically be sure and I can basically, rest assured that, okay, this task will take 1 minute for the normal person to complete according to my calculations, which means if someone is slower, then you either need to teach them more, and if they are faster, then they are basically an A player. Now, for one-time clients, whereby you basically service them one time, for the SOPs that you give to them, you basically want to build the SOPs after the first 5 customers or after the first cohort. Now, the reason for this is after the first 5 customers and after the first cohort, you can kind of predict what they'll kind of fall into. So like after the first cohort, if you're a coach, or first 5 customers, if you're a service provider, you can kind of predict what will basically happen or the kind of issues that they'll kind of fall into, which means with this prediction, you can kind of create SOPs for that. So create SOPs based on the predictions, and trust me, most of the time your predictions will be correct, because the first 5 for the first cohort, they are basically like the action takers, because they are willing to actually take the risk of having a business interaction with someone who is doing the space, which means if they are the risk takers, then the normal guys who follow after should probably have the same problems that they do have. So when it comes to building SOPs for one-time clients, normally after the first 5 clients, you basically have an idea of what is going on. That is when I build the systems, the SOPs, like all the sheets or the technical stuff, because that is when you are supposed to do it. Now, for ongoing clients, let's say if you are a growth operator or some kind of cold email agency or some kind of SMMA, the best way to basically build systems and SOPs for this group is after onboarding and before delivery. Now you'll be asking why? Why this? And the reason is because normally if you sign a client, you basically give a time frame of when you think, okay, you onboard and deliver them. Now for most agencies, it's most likely around 14 days. So from 7 to 21 days, that's like the normal span. The thing is, normally, if you're not lying, you basically finish before the allocated time. So like let's say if you allocate 14 days, 14 days till launch or 14 days till delivery, then you are basically finished around day 6. Now, the 8 days that are left, the 8 days, are basically for system building. So system building and SOP, because this is the time that you can basically lay the foundation. A lot of guys, and I used to be one of them, I used to wait after the delivery. So like let's say after launch and after we have the campaign going, and that is when I will start building the SOPs. The thing is, that is when it becomes hectic, because then you cannot even predict if you have time or not. So for ongoing clients, and this is the most important, you want to build the SOPs directly after onboarding them and before. So there's a discrepancy over here. This discrepancy of time is where we basically want to fit in the systems and SOP building before anything happens. And for your own business, basically after the first employee. So the first employee of every department, if possible, because the SOPs that you create for tech will not be the same SOPs that you create for marketing. So after you get the first employee of every department, that is when you should basically solidify the SOPs for that department. And now normally the first employee, if good enough, they basically become the head of that department. Then they'll basically head the SOPs, so they'll head that department and make sure that the future SOPs are basically under them. So that is how I basically structure my SOPs. This was supposed to be a very short video, and it is.